I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 36, and until last year, I was an art curator living what seemed like a charmed life with my husband of 12 years, James Wilson. That was before I discovered his affair with Natalie, his 27-year-old secretary. The divorce was brutal, but nothing prepared me for the humiliation of seeing them flaunting their relationship at Malibu Beach. James thought he had it all: the girl, the money, the power. What he didn't count on was his father's will and how it would change everything. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and join me on this journey of betrayal and unexpected justice. I met James Wilson 15 years ago at a gallery fundraiser in Manhattan. I was 21, fresh out of college with an art history degree, working my first real job as an assistant curator at a small but respected gallery. The fundraiser was for arts education in underprivileged communities, a cause I was passionate about. James attended because his family foundation was one of the major donors. I remember the moment I first saw him: tall, confident, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He was 30 then, already a key figure in his family's real estate empire, Wilson Properties. Despite his obvious wealth and status, what struck me most was how he actually listened when I talked about the emerging artists we were featuring. Most wealthy donors nodded politely before moving on, but James asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested. "You've got a good eye," he told me after I explained why I'd fought to include a controversial sculptor in the exhibition. "You see value where others don't. That's rare." That night turned into dinner at an exclusive restaurant I could never have afforded on my own. Dinner turned into more dates, and soon we were inseparable. James was charming, intelligent, and seemed to value my perspective despite our different backgrounds. I came from a solidly middle-class family in Oregon. My father was a high school teacher, my mother a nurse. The Wilson name, by contrast, was synonymous with old money and New York real estate development. Our whirlwind romance progressed quickly. Within 6 months, James proposed during a weekend trip to Paris, presenting me with a family heirloom ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes without hesitation. I was in love, and naively believed our connection transcended the vast differences in our backgrounds and wealth. The wedding was held at the Wilson estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and private beach access. 300 guests attended, though I knew barely 30 of them. Most were James's business associates, family friends, and New York society figures whose names I'd only seen in magazine articles about charity galas. It was at the wedding that I first met Frederick Wilson, James's father, properly. Frederick was a formidable man, 70 years old at the time, but with the sharp mind and commanding presence that had helped him expand his father's modest real estate holdings into the Wilson empire. Unlike his son, Frederick hadn't been born into wealth. He'd built much of the company through strategic decisions, hard work, and according to some, ruthless business tactics when necessary. "Welcome to the family, Rebecca," Frederick had said, kissing my cheek. His eyes, the same steel blue as his son's, assessed me carefully. "James tells me you've got both talent and work ethic. I respect that. Too many young people in our circles haven't worked a day in their lives." James had tensed slightly at his father's words, and I would later come to understand the complicated dynamics between them. Frederick had always pushed James to prove himself, to earn his position in the company rather than simply inherit it. James resented this pressure while simultaneously craving his father's approval. The early years of our marriage were genuinely happy. We purchased a beautiful brownstone in the Upper East Side and renovated it together, blending my more artistic sensibilities with James's preference for modern luxury. I continued my career, eventually becoming a full curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, specializing in contemporary American artists. James seemed proud of my accomplishments, often bringing business associates to my exhibition openings. We traveled extensively: summers in Italy, ski trips to Switzerland, exploring art scenes in Berlin, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires. In those moments, away from New York and the Wilson family business, we were at our best together. James relaxed, his competitive edge softening as we explored ancient ruins or discovered hidden neighborhood restaurants. Frederick remained a constant presence in our lives. Sunday dinners at his Central Park West penthouse were mandatory unless we were out of town. He took a surprising interest in my career, often asking insightful questions about exhibitions I was curating. Sometimes I felt he respected my work ethic more than he did James's business acumen, which created tension I tried to navigate carefully. "You've got substance, Rebecca," Frederick told me once when James was taking a phone call during dinner. "You understand that value comes from creating something meaningful, not just accumulating wealth." I wish James understood that better. By our 5th year of marriage, small cracks began to appear. James became increasingly absorbed in the business, working longer hours as Frederick gradually gave him more responsibility. Our conversations shifted from art, philosophy, and travel plans to company acquisitions and development projects. Nights when we both arrived home in time for dinner together became rarer. We had discussed having children early in our marriage, but James always found reasons to delay. First, he wanted to reach certain career milestones. Then, he wanted to ensure we had the right properties, including a weekend home with space for children to play. Later, it was concerns about my career and whether I'd resent giving up professional opportunities for motherhood. "Next year will be better timing," became his standard response. "The Jensen project will be completed, and I can take more time off." But the Jensen project was followed by the Riverside development, then the expansion into Miami markets. The timing was never right, and as I approached my mid-30s, I began to wonder if James actually wanted children at all. Our 10th anniversary marked a turning point, though I didn't recognize it then. I had arranged an intimate dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. I spent weeks planning it, coordinating with the chef for a special menu that recreated dishes from significant moments in our relationship. James was 40 minutes late, distracted throughout dinner by messages on his phone, and left before dessert due to a crisis with an overseas investor. The next day, he sent an enormous bouquet of roses to my office with an expensive bracelet. The card read, "Sorry about last night. Business never sleeps. Love you." The gesture felt hollow, a financial transaction to make up for emotional absence. I placed the bracelet in my jewelry box and rarely wore it. Looking back, I should have recognized the signs. The growing distance. The perfunctory kisses. The conversations that never went deeper than scheduling and social events. But I was invested in the narrative of our perfect life, the successful power couple with the enviable marriage. I didn't want to see what was happening right before my eyes. The changes in James were subtle at first. He'd always worked long hours, but suddenly he was unavailable even when physically present, constantly checking his phone, smiling at private messages, taking calls in another room. Weekend business trips became more frequent, often arranged at the last minute. "The Singapore investors can only meet this weekend," he'd explain, "or if the Miami property needs my personal attention, there's a zoning issue." I might have continued believing him if I hadn't met Natalie Parker at the company Christmas party 12 months ago. She was introduced as James's new executive assistant, hired personally by him after his previous assistant of 8 years retired. Natalie was 27, with glossy dark hair, expertly applied makeup, and the kind of polished appearance that comes from expensive taste and ample resources to indulge it. What struck me wasn't her obvious beauty but the familiar way she interacted with James. They had inside jokes. She anticipated his needs before he expressed them. When she handed him a scotch, she knew exactly how he took it. 2 ice cubes, no more, no less. These were small things, details that might seem insignificant, but they suggested an intimacy that went beyond professional boundaries. I watched them throughout the evening, noting the lingering glances, the subtle touches that seemed unnecessary for workplace colleagues. When James introduced Natalie to Frederick, I noticed how she charmed him with knowledge about his favorite architectural projects and charitable interests, information that seemed oddly specific for a new employee to know. That night, I attempted to discuss my concerns with James. "You and Natalie seem very comfortable with each other," I said carefully as we prepared for bed. James didn't look up from his phone. "She's efficient. Best assistant I've had. Makes my life easier. She seems to know a lot about you. About our family. He finally glanced up, his expression hardening slightly. That's her job, Rebecca. To know what I need before I ask. Don't tell me you're being paranoid. I'm not being paranoid. I'm noticing things. Well, notice something else, he snapped. I'm tired of your insecurities. If I wanted to be interrogated, I'd visit the police station. The conversation ended there. James slept in the guest room that night, claiming he had early calls with Asian markets and didn't want to disturb me. It was the first of many nights he wouldn't share our bed. January marked my birthday. James and I had always celebrated with a weekend getaway, a tradition since our first year together. This year, he called the day before with a familiar excuse. The Vancouver project is falling apart. I need to fly out tonight. It's my birthday weekend, James. We always spend it together. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you. We'll do something special when I get back. Something inside me finally broke. After hanging up, I sat in our bedroom looking at photos from happier times. Who had we become? When had we stopped being partners and started being strangers who shared an address? The next morning, my actual birthday, I received flowers but no call. By afternoon, hurt had transformed into determination. I would surprise James at his office before he left for Vancouver. Perhaps a spontaneous lunch, a chance to reconnect. I even made a reservation at his favorite restaurant near his office. I dressed carefully, wore the perfume he had once said drove him wild. The receptionist at Wilson Properties greeted me warmly. I was still Mrs. Wilson, after all. She mentioned James was in a meeting but should be finishing soon. I'll just wait in his office, I told her. I want to surprise him for my birthday. She hesitated but buzzed me through. The executive floor was quiet, most offices empty during the lunch hour. James's corner office door was closed, but I could hear movement inside. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door without knocking. The scene is forever burned into my memory. James, sitting in his executive chair. Natalie, perched on his lap, her skirt hiked up, his hands on her waist. They broke apart when the door opened, but not quickly enough. Not nearly quickly enough. For an excruciating moment, nobody spoke. Natalie scrambled off his lap, adjusting her clothing. James's face cycled through expressions: surprise, irritation, and finally, a cold mask of control. Rebecca, he said, as if I'd arrived for a scheduled appointment rather than discovered my husband's infidelity. You should have called first. Not an apology. Not even embarrassment. Just annoyance at the inconvenience of being caught. Natalie grabbed her tablet from the desk. I'll give you two some privacy, she murmured, slipping past me with downcast eyes. Once the door closed, I found my voice. How long? James straightened his tie, buying time. Does it matter? Of course it matters. Is she the reason for all the late nights? The weekend trips? He sighed, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who had already calculated the costs and benefits of honesty versus continued deception. 6 months, give or take. It just happened, Rebecca. These things happen in marriages. They happen? Like accidents? Like weather events beyond human control? My voice rose with each question. You made choices, James. Hundreds of choices to betray our marriage. He had the audacity to look irritated. If you'd been more present, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. You're always so wrapped up in your exhibitions, your artist friends, your museum politics. The blame shifting stunned me momentarily. My career had never been an issue before. In fact, James had always claimed to admire my professional dedication. My work? You're blaming your affair on my career, when you're the one who's been canceling plans, missing dinners, and sleeping in the guest room for months. James stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a gesture that felt like closing a door. I think we both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time. Natalie understands the pressures I'm under. She supports me without constant demands and guilt trips. I barely remember leaving his office. The elevator ride, the walk through the lobby, the moment I reached my car, all a blur of shock and humiliation. I sat behind the wheel, unable to drive as tears came in violent waves. My phone chimed with a text message from James. "I'll stay at the penthouse tonight. We can discuss logistics when I return from Vancouver. Please be reasonable about this, Rebecca." Reasonable. As if discovering your husband's infidelity on your birthday was a minor business setback requiring pragmatic problem-solving. That evening, as I sat alone in our brownstone surrounded by photos of our life together, my phone rang. Frederick Wilson's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, unable to face James's family with my fresh humiliation. "Rebecca?" Frederick's voice, usually commanding, sounded concerned. "James just called me about what happened. Are you all right? Did he tell you everything?" I asked, voice raw from crying. "Enough for me to know my son has acted dishonorably," Frederick replied. "This isn't how I raised him to treat his wife." The conversation that followed was unexpected. Frederick didn't offer excuses for James. He didn't suggest I had somehow contributed to the situation. Instead, he listened as I poured out my hurt and betrayal, offering the paternal comfort I desperately needed. "Whatever happens next," Frederick said before hanging up, "remember that you've conducted yourself with dignity. The Wilson name is lucky to have been associated with you, even if my son was too foolish to recognize what he had." The following weeks passed in a blur. James returned from Vancouver but moved directly to the company penthouse rather than coming home. Communication happened through brief texts and emails, most related to practical matters like bill payments and mail forwarding. 3 weeks after my birthday, a courier delivered a thick envelope containing divorce papers. James had already signed them. A post-it note in his handwriting read simply, "My lawyer will contact yours." It was the prenuptial agreement that delivered the final shock. When we'd signed it years earlier, James had assured me it was a standard document protecting certain family properties and heirlooms. What I hadn't understood, and what he hadn't explained, was a clause severely limiting my financial claims in case of infidelity by either party. The cruel irony, the clause would have protected me had I been the one to cheat. Instead, it gave James a financial escape hatch from his own betrayal. The first mediation session took place in a sterile conference room in Midtown Manhattan. James arrived with Randall Thornton, one of the city's most aggressive divorce attorneys, known for representing wealthy businessmen. I had hired Eleanor Simmons, a respected family lawyer with a good reputation but without Thornton's ruthless edge or exorbitant fees. James barely looked at me during the session. He sat scrolling through his phone while Thornton outlined their position. The prenuptial agreement was binding, I had agreed to its terms, and any attempt to challenge it would result in prolonged, expensive litigation. Mrs. Wilson signed with full legal counsel, Thornton emphasized, though we both knew my counsel had been a junior associate from James's company's law firm, hardly independent advice. Eleanor argued for fairness beyond the strict prenup terms, pointing out my contributions to James's success and our shared life. Thornton responded with clinical detachment. The agreement specifically addresses infidelity. Mr. Wilson is prepared to offer a one-time settlement of $250,000, contingent upon a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of the divorce. $250,000. After 12 years of marriage to a man worth millions. The figure wasn't just insulting, it was designed to be. James wanted to punish me for discovering his betrayal. Additionally, Thornton continued, Mr. Wilson will require Mrs. Wilson to vacate their residence within 30 days. That's our home, I protested, breaking my silence. I helped design every room. My art collection. The brownstone is titled solely in Mr. Wilson's name, Thornton interrupted. As for the art collection, pieces purchased with joint funds can be inventoried and assessed for potential division. James finally looked up from his phone. You can have the Diebenkorn print. It was always your favorite. As if offering a meaningful concession. How generous of you, James, I replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. One print out of 50 pieces we collected together. He shrugged and returned to his phone. The man I'd loved for 12 years couldn't even bother to engage in the dismantling of our life together. The second mediation session a week later brought an unexpected development. As Eleanor and I reviewed Thornton's revised proposal, marginally better but still grossly unfair, the conference room door opened and Frederick Wilson walked in, accompanied by his own attorney. James visibly tensed. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Frederick nodded at me before addressing his son. "Making sure the Wilson name isn't further tarnished by dishonorable behavior." "This is a private matter," James replied, color rising in his face. "Nothing in this family is truly private, son. Not when it affects our reputation and values." Frederick's presence changed the dynamic dramatically. While he had no direct legal standing in our divorce, his influence over James and the family company was undeniable. He didn't directly countermand James's position, but his occasional questions and comments pushed toward a more equitable resolution. "The Colorado property was a wedding gift to both of them," Frederick reminded Thornton at one point. "Strange to consider it solely a Wilson family asset now." Despite Frederick's influence, the settlement remained heavily weighted in James's favor. The prenup's infidelity clause stood as an insurmountable legal barrier. I would receive the Colorado vacation property, a more reasonable financial settlement of $1.2 million, still a fraction of what equal division would have provided, and 6 months to relocate from our home rather than 30 days. The most painful concession was the non-disclosure agreement. By signing it, I agreed never to publicly discuss James's affair or the details of our divorce. His reputation would remain intact while I would bear the whispers and speculation that inevitably follow a failed marriage in high society circles. "You don't have to sign today," Eleanor advised as we reviewed the final settlement. "We could still fight the prenup, argue coercion or incomplete disclosure." "And spend years in litigation?" I shook my head. "I want this over. I need to rebuild my life." Frederick approached me as I gathered my things. James had already left the room, typical of his avoidance throughout the process. "This isn't justice," Frederick said quietly. "But sometimes the truest victory is in moving forward with dignity. James will discover that money doesn't shield you from the consequences of your choices." His cryptic comment stayed with me, though I was too emotionally exhausted to decipher its meaning. My friends became my lifeline during those dark months. Sophia offered her guest room until I found a new place. Margaret, my colleague at the museum, connected me with a therapist specializing in divorce and betrayal trauma. Thomas, an art dealer I'd worked with for years, helped me catalog and value my personal collection, ensuring James couldn't claim pieces that were rightfully mine. The final court appearance was mercifully brief. The judge reviewed our settlement, asked if we both understood and accepted the terms, and pronounced our marriage dissolved. Throughout the 15-minute proceeding, James stared straight ahead, never once meeting my eyes. When the judge announced we were no longer husband and wife, James immediately checked his watch and whispered something to Thornton, clearly eager to leave for his next appointment. 12 years of marriage, dismissed with the same consideration one might give to a mildly inconvenient dental cleaning. Moving out of our brownstone felt like experiencing the death of our relationship in slow motion. Each room held memories. The living room where we'd hosted dinner parties for museum benefactors, the study where I'd write exhibition catalogs while James reviewed contracts, the kitchen where we'd cooked together on rare Sunday mornings when neither of us had obligations. I took only what was undisputedly mine: clothes, personal items, family heirlooms from my parents, and the art pieces clearly purchased with my separate funds or gifted specifically to me. The Diebenkorn print James had so generously offered stayed on the wall. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. My new apartment in Brooklyn was 1/3 the size of our brownstone, with none of the architectural details or premium finishes I'd grown accustomed to. But it was mine, paid for with my settlement money, a place to begin again without daily reminders of James's betrayal. The divorce decree arrived by certified mail exactly 1 year after our wedding anniversary. The timing felt deliberate, James's final twist of the knife. I signed for the envelope, thanked the mail carrier, closed my door, and allowed myself one last evening of mourning what I'd lost. The next morning would be about what lay ahead. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I accepted my friend Sophia's invitation to spend a week at her Malibu Beach house. My professional life was slowly rebuilding. I'd secured a guest curator position at a respected gallery in Chelsea and was interviewing for permanent roles at several museums. Emotionally, I remained fragile but functioning, gradually rediscovering who Rebecca Mitchell was separate from Rebecca Wilson. Sophia's modern glass and cedar beach house perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific offered exactly the peaceful retreat I needed. Mornings were spent applying for positions and working remotely on exhibition concepts. Afternoons, I walked the beach, letting the rhythm of waves wash away lingering bitterness and regret. On my third day, Sophia had meetings in Los Angeles, leaving me alone with the endless horizon and my thoughts. After lunch, I took my usual walk along the shoreline, venturing further than previous days. The public beach gradually gave way to more exclusive stretches fronting multimillion-dollar properties. I stayed near the water's edge, where public access remained legal regardless of who owned the adjacent land. That's when I saw them. James and Natalie, on the private beach section of what appeared to be a recently purchased Malibu property. They hadn't noticed me yet. James was setting up an elaborate picnic while Natalie reclined on a designer beach blanket, large sunglasses hiding half her face. A sleek yacht bobbed in the water nearby, clearly new and ostentatious even by luxury vessel standards. My first instinct was to turn around immediately, but something kept me rooted in place. Perhaps it was morbid curiosity, or maybe some part of me needed to confront this reality to fully move forward. I continued walking, keeping my gaze mostly on the sand before me but aware in my peripheral vision that I would soon draw even with their position. I hoped to pass unnoticed, just another anonymous beach walker. No such luck. Rebecca? James's voice carried across the sand. Is that you? I looked up, forcing my face into neutral composure. James stood at the edge of his beach setup, champagne bottle in hand. Natalie had risen to a sitting position, whispering something to him. I could have ignored them, continued walking. Instead, I stopped, shielding my eyes from the sun. Hello, James. He gestured broadly at the elaborate setup, the yacht, the beach furniture that looked like it had been staged for a magazine shoot, the champagne cooling in a silver bucket. Just enjoying some California sunshine, he called, voice carrying the artificial cheer of someone performing for an audience. Closed the Westside development deal last week. Thought we'd celebrate. I nodded politely, prepared to continue my walk, when Natalie stood and wrapped herself around James's arm possessively. That's when I saw it, the delicate gold and pearl bracelet on her wrist. My grandmother's bracelet, a family heirloom James had given me on our 5th anniversary. I had left it behind during the move, unable to locate it among my jewelry. James noticed my gaze fixed on the bracelet and deliberately raised Natalie's hand to his lips, kissing it while maintaining eye contact with me. The message couldn't have been clearer. He had given his new girlfriend something precious from my family history. Looks like you're doing well, I managed to say, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. Never better, James replied, then deliberately pulled Natalie close and kissed her deeply, putting on a show he knew I would find painful. When they separated, Natalie laughed a tinkling, artificial sound and waved at me with the hand bearing my grandmother's bracelet. Nice to see you, Rebecca. Love your casual look. I glanced down at my simple sundress and sandals, so different from Natalie's designer swimwear and jewel-encrusted sunglasses. For a moment, I felt shabby and diminished, exactly as they intended. James raised his champagne flute in a mock toast. To new beginnings. Some of us move up in the world, some, well. He shrugged, the gesture dismissing my entire existence. I stood frozen, humiliation burning through me. James had orchestrated this entire display, the yacht, the champagne, the bracelet, knowing I frequently visited Sophia in Malibu. This wasn't coincidence, it was calculated cruelty. Enjoy your celebration, I finally replied, proud that my voice remained steady. I hope it fills whatever's empty inside you, James. His smug expression faltered momentarily before he recovered, offering an exaggerated wave as I continued walking. Behind me, I heard Natalie's laughter and James's voice, deliberately loud. God, did you see her face? Priceless. I managed to maintain my composure until rounding the bend that would take me out of their sight. Then my knees gave way. I sank onto the sand, breath coming in short gasps as a full-blown panic attack overwhelmed me. The carefully constructed healing of 6 months crumbled in minutes of deliberate humiliation. Eventually, I gathered enough strength to return to Sophia's house, where I collapsed on the sofa, still shaking. When she returned from her meetings, she found me in the same position, staring blankly at the ocean view. What happened? She demanded after one look at my face. I described the encounter through fresh tears. Sophia's expression transformed from concern to fury. That absolute bastard, she spat. The property must be the Montgomery place it sold last month. Of course James would buy directly next to people who know you. It's not just the house, I said, showing her the Instagram notification on my phone. James had posted photos from their beach day, including one of Natalie wearing my grandmother's bracelet, captioned, "Some treasures deserve a fresh setting." Sophia took my phone and deleted the Instagram app entirely. No more. You don't need to see his performance art. That's all this is, a performance designed to hurt you because his ego can't handle that you're rebuilding your life without him. That evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on Sophia's deck, my phone rang with a number I recognized but hadn't seen in months. Frederick Wilson. Rebecca, his voice sounded older, more tired than I remembered. I heard about what happened today. James's childish display. How did you? Sophia contacted my assistant, he explained. She thought I should know how my son is behaving. I shot Sophia a look of surprise. She shrugged unapologetically. I'm in Los Angeles for the week, Frederick continued. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? There are matters we should discuss. Despite my emotional exhaustion, I found myself agreeing. Frederick had been the one member of the Wilson family who had shown me genuine respect throughout the divorce. Whatever he wanted to discuss, I owed him the courtesy of listening. The Marchand at 7, he suggested, naming an old-school steakhouse known for its privacy and discretion. And Rebecca? Don't mention this to James. Some conversations are best kept between those who understand the meaning of integrity. The cryptic comment reminded me of his words during our divorce mediation. Once again, I wondered what Frederick Wilson knew that the rest of us didn't. The Marchand hadn't changed in the decade since I'd last visited. The same dark wood paneling, leather booths, and discreet lighting created an atmosphere of old-world masculine luxury. It was Frederick's favorite restaurant in Los Angeles, a place where deals were made and secrets shared among the city's power brokers. Frederick waited at a corner booth, standing as I approached. At 75, he remained an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and those piercing blue eyes so similar to James's. But unlike his son's calculating gaze, Frederick's eyes held warmth as he greeted me. Rebecca. Thank you for coming. He kissed my cheek before gesturing for me to sit. You look well, all things considered. All things considered, I echoed with a small smile. That's a very diplomatic way of putting it. A waiter appeared instantly, taking our drink orders, scotch for Frederick, white wine for me, before disappearing with practiced invisibility. I won't waste time with small talk, Frederick said once we were alone. First, I want to apologize for my son's behavior yesterday. It was beneath the dignity of the Wilson name. You're not responsible for James's actions. Perhaps not directly. But every parent bears some responsibility for the adult their child becomes. His fingers drummed briefly on the table, a rare display of agitation from a man known for his control. James's mother died when he was young. Perhaps I indulged him too much afterward, trying to compensate for her absence. Our drinks arrived, providing a moment's pause. Frederick, I said gently, you didn't invite me here to discuss James's childhood. His expression shifted, becoming more grave. No, I didn't. He took a sip of scotch before continuing. Rebecca, I'm not well. My doctor has confirmed what I've suspected for months. My heart is failing. Treatment options exist, but realistically, I'm looking at a year, perhaps two. The news struck me harder than expected. Despite our complicated history, I'd always respected Frederick. In many ways, he'd been more of a friend to me than my own father-in-law. I'm so sorry, I said, reaching across to briefly touch his hand. Is there anything I can do? A smile briefly softened his features. Always thinking of others, even when they've given you every reason not to. That's why I wanted to see you, why I need to explain something important. Frederick withdrew a leather portfolio from his briefcase, placing it on the table between us. What do you know about the Wilson family wealth structure, Rebecca? The question surprised me. Only what James mentioned occasionally. The family trust, the real estate holdings, the various companies under the Wilson Enterprises umbrella. Yes, but who controls those assets? When I didn't immediately answer, Frederick continued. James has created an impression, one I allowed to persist, that he personally controls significant wealth. The reality is more complicated. Frederick opened the portfolio, revealing legal documents. Despite my son's executive title and public role in the company, nearly all significant Wilson assets remain under my direct control. The properties, including James's brownstone and that new Malibu monstrosity, are owned by trusts I manage. His executive compensation is generous but primarily salary-based. The true family wealth, approximately 80% of it, remains mine to distribute as I see fit. I frowned, confused by this revelation and its relevance to me. Why are you telling me this, Frederick? Because 6 months ago, I revised my will. His expression grew solemn. For decades, my estate plan was straightforward. James would inherit everything. The company, the properties, the investments. But watching his behavior toward you, seeing how callously he discarded 12 years of marriage for a fleeting infatuation, it revealed a fundamental character flaw I can no longer ignore. He turned several pages in the portfolio, revealing a document titled Last Will and Testament of Frederick Allen Wilson. My revised will includes a moral character clause. For James to inherit the bulk of the Wilson estate, he must demonstrate moral character and family loyalty consistent with Wilson family values. The determination will be made by a panel of 3 trustees, my brother Edward, my oldest friend Richard Harrington, and our family attorney Jonathan Becker. I stared at Frederick, finally understanding the purpose of our meeting. James doesn't know. He knows I updated my will. He doesn't know the specifics. Frederick's eyes held a hint of the strategic brilliance that had built his empire. James assumes that regardless of his personal behavior, his position as my only child guarantees his inheritance. He's wrong. Frederick turned another page, pointing to a specific clause. I've explicitly defined infidelity and betrayal of family commitments as examples of moral failure that would trigger disinheritance. The implication slowly dawned on me. So when James and Natalie were flaunting their relationship at the beach, they were potentially compromising his entire inheritance, yes. Frederick closed the portfolio. James believes he can act without consequences because his wealth protects him. He needs to learn that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in one's integrity. I sat back, processing this information. Why tell me this? The divorce is final. Nothing changes for me either way. 2 reasons, Frederick replied, signaling for another round of drinks. First, I wanted you to know that justice sometimes arrives through unexpected channels. What James did to you was wrong, and while I can't undo it, I can ensure it doesn't go unrecognized. And the second reason? Frederick hesitated, uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his features. The Wilson Enterprises 30th anniversary gala is next month. I'd like you to attend. The request startled me. Frederick, that would be incredibly awkward. James will be there with Natalie. The gossip alone. I understand it's asking a lot, he acknowledged. But this event has significance beyond a mere corporate celebration. Certain announcements will be made regarding the company's future leadership and succession plans. Your presence would be meaningful. I studied him carefully. Are you asking me to be there to witness James's humiliation? Because revenge isn't something I'm interested in. Not revenge, Frederick corrected firmly. Accountability. There's a difference. He leaned forward. Rebecca, I'm not asking you to participate in anything vindictive. I'm asking you to be present for a necessary correction, one that might help James become the man I still hope he can be. Our main courses arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As we began eating, I considered Frederick's request. Attending the gala would be painful, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. Yet something in Frederick's manner suggested this was important beyond mere corporate politics. Will you at least consider it? He asked after several minutes of silent eating. Not for James's sake, certainly not for Natalie's, but perhaps for your own closure. And, if I may be selfish, for an old man who always wished you had been his daughter rather than merely his daughter-in-law. The unexpected sentiment touched me deeply. Throughout my marriage, Frederick had often shown me more genuine respect and affection than James had, especially in later years. I'll attend, I finally agreed. But I won't participate in anything cruel or vindictive. Frederick nodded, relief evident in his expression. I wouldn't expect you to. Your compassion has always been one of your greatest strengths, Rebecca. It's something the Wilson family could use more of. As dinner concluded, Frederick insisted on paying despite my protests. Outside the restaurant, his driver waiting with the car, he took both my hands in his. Whatever happens next month, remember that you conducted yourself with honor throughout your marriage and divorce. The same cannot be said for everyone involved. I watched his car pull away, wondering what exactly I had agreed to and whether I would regret it. The Wilson family had already taken so much from me, my home, my security, my belief in lasting love. Now Frederick was asking me to revisit that pain for reasons he wouldn't fully explain. Yet somehow, I trusted his intentions. In a family where genuine integrity seemed increasingly rare, Frederick Wilson might be the last one standing. The Wilson Enterprises Anniversary Gala was held at the company headquarters in downtown Los Angeles, the entire top floor transformed into an elegant venue with panoramic city views. For weeks, I'd wavered about attending, changing my mind daily until Sophia finally took matters into her own hands. We're going shopping, she announced the weekend before the event. You need armor, not just a dress. The emerald green gown we selected was unlike anything I'd worn during my marriage. Where James had preferred me in understated neutrals that complemented rather than outshone his presence, this dress commanded attention, structured shoulders, a fitted bodice, and a subtle shimmer that caught the light with each movement. My newly highlighted hair, cut into a modern bob, completed the transformation. Perfect, Sophia declared as we finished final alterations. This isn't just a dress, it's a statement that you're not just surviving, you're flourishing. The night of the gala, Sophia accompanied me for moral support, remaining at my side as we navigated the entrance. Familiar faces turned as we entered, former social acquaintances, James's business associates, arts patrons I'd worked with during my curatorial career. Their expressions ranged from surprise to curiosity to barely concealed discomfort. Rebecca. A friendly voice broke through the awkwardness as Margaret, my former museum colleague, approached with genuine warmth. I didn't expect to see you here. You look absolutely stunning. Her normalcy helped settle my nerves. We chatted briefly about her recent exhibition and my consulting work before her husband pulled her away to greet another guest. I was acutely aware of not having seen James or Natalie yet, though I knew they must be present. Frederick had arranged for my place card to be at a table near the front, away from James but with excellent visibility to the podium where speeches would take place. I had just taken my seat when I felt the room's energy shift. Turning slightly, I saw James entering with Natalie on his arm. She wore a dramatic red gown that verged on inappropriate for a corporate event, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. My grandmother's bracelet, I noticed, was conspicuously absent. James scanned the room with practiced social confidence until his gaze landed on me. The momentary shock that crossed his features gave me more satisfaction than I cared to admit. He clearly hadn't expected me to attend, much less to look confident and composed. He whispered something to Natalie, whose expression darkened as she spotted me. She clutched his arm more possessively, tilting her chin with defiance. I turned away, refusing to engage in their psychological games. Frederick appeared at my table moments later, looking distinguished in a classic tuxedo though noticeably thinner than at our dinner meeting. "You came," he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "And you look remarkable, Rebecca." "I gave my word," I replied simply. "Though I still don't fully understand why my presence matters." "You will," he assured me before moving to greet other guests. Throughout dinner, I felt James watching me from his table across the room. When I occasionally met his gaze, his expression cycled between confusion, irritation, and calculation. He was trying to determine why I was there, what advantage I might be seeking. The concept that I might simply be honoring Frederick's request wouldn't occur to him. James always assumed ulterior motives in others because they were so central to his own behavior. After the main course, Frederick approached the podium. The room quieted immediately, respect for the patriarch evident in the attentive faces turned his way. 30 years ago, Frederick began, his voice strong despite his health challenges. Wilson Enterprises consisted of 3 commercial properties and a small development firm. Today, we manage billions in assets across 4 continents. He paused as applause rippled through the room. But buildings and balance sheets don't create a legacy. Character does. Values do. The choices we make when faced with ethical crossroads define us far more than our financial statements. An unusual tension filled the room. This wasn't the typical corporate celebration speech highlighting growth metrics and strategic acquisitions. Frederick was speaking about something more fundamental. Recently, I'd been reflecting on succession planning, on ensuring Wilson Enterprises continues to operate with the values upon which it was built. To that end, I've made several significant decisions regarding the company's future leadership and the disposition of my personal estate. At a nearby table, James straightened in his chair, a confident smile playing on his lips. He clearly anticipated a public acknowledgement of his position as heir apparent. Frederick continued, "I've invited some special guests tonight. In addition to our valued business partners, we're joined by my attorney, Jonathan Becker, and the 2 other trustees of my estate, my brother Edward and my friend Richard Harrington." 3 older gentlemen at a front table nodded in acknowledgement. Their presence confirmed this wasn't merely a corporate announcement but something more personal and legally significant. "While this may seem an unusual venue, I've always believed in transparency," Frederick explained. "Tonight, I'm publicly announcing key provisions of my recently updated will and succession plan for Wilson Enterprises. Jonathan, would you please join me?" The attorney approached, carrying a leather portfolio similar to the one Frederick had shown me during our dinner. James's expression shifted from smug anticipation to uncertainty. "The Wilson family wealth," Frederick continued, "represents not just financial assets but a value system built on integrity, honesty, and loyalty. My will now explicitly requires that any heir demonstrate these qualities to inherit." He nodded to Jonathan, who opened the portfolio and began reading. "I, Frederick Allen Wilson, being of sound mind, hereby declare that inheritance of the Wilson family assets, including controlling interest in Wilson Enterprises, all real estate holdings in the Wilson Family Trust, and personal investments, shall be contingent upon the heir demonstrating moral character and family loyalty consistent with Wilson family values, as determined by the appointed trustees." Jonathan paused, then continued with the specific clause Frederick had shown me. "Acts including but not limited to infidelity, betrayal of family commitments, dishonesty in business dealings, or other moral failures shall disqualify potential heirs from full inheritance." A murmur swept through the room. James's face had drained of color. Natalie clutched his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Frederick reclaimed the podium. "Effective immediately, management of Wilson Enterprises will undergo restructuring. James Wilson will remain on the executive team but will report to a newly appointed CEO and board oversight committee. Additionally, majority ownership of Wilson Enterprises will, upon my passing, transfer to the Wilson Family Foundation rather than to any individual. The implications were clear to everyone in the room, most of all James. He was being publicly demoted and effectively disinherited, all in front of the business community he'd spent years trying to impress. Furthermore, Frederick continued, his voice now carrying an edge of emotion, the trustees have already made a preliminary assessment regarding current behaviors that fail to meet our family's character standards. As a result, certain assets previously made available to James Wilson will revert to foundation control, including the recently purchased Malibu property and the yacht, New Beginnings. James stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he declared, voice carrying across the now silent room. "You can't do this. I'm your son, your only heir." Frederick regarded him steadily. "Being my son gives you opportunity, James. It doesn't guarantee outcomes regardless of behavior. This is about her, isn't it?" James jabbed a finger in my direction. "You always liked Rebecca better than me. She's manipulated you, turned you against your own blood." The accusation hung in the air, so blatantly false that several guests shifted uncomfortably. Frederick's expression hardened. "Rebecca hasn't spoken to me about you or the will, James. She's here tonight at my request, as a witness to consequences that are entirely of your making." "I'll contest this," James threatened, Natalie now tugging at his arm, trying to get him to sit down. "No court will uphold a will with subjective character clauses." "You're welcome to try," Frederick replied calmly. "The trustee's determination is already documented, witnessed, and filed with multiple legal safeguards. But more importantly, is this really how you want to conduct yourself? Publicly threatening your father rather than reflecting on the choices that led to this moment?" James's face contorted with rage. He shook off Natalie's restraining hand and strode toward me, stopping just short of my table. "Are you happy now?" he hissed. "Watching my father humiliate me? Was this your revenge plan all along?" I met his gaze calmly. "I didn't know what Frederick planned to announce tonight, James. But your choices created this situation, not mine." "Liar," he shouted, drawing gasps from nearby tables. "You've always been jealous of my position, my wealth. You couldn't stand that I found happiness with someone else." Security personnel appeared at James's side, a discreet but firm presence. "Mr. Wilson, please come with us. You can't throw me out. This is my company." James protested as they guided him firmly toward the exit. Natalie hesitated, looking from James to the room full of witnesses, calculation evident in her expression. She made her decision quickly, grabbing her clutch and following James rather than remaining to face the aftermath alone. As they disappeared through the exit, an uncomfortable silence blanketed the room. Frederick returned to the podium. "I apologize for that unpleasantness. Please, enjoy the remainder of the evening." The orchestra began playing again, conversation slowly resumed, though now centered entirely on the dramatic scene they had just witnessed. Frederick made his way to my table, sitting heavily in the chair beside me. "That was more public than I intended," he admitted, suddenly looking every one of his 75 years. James's reaction forced my hand. "Are you all right?" I asked, genuinely concerned about the strain on his health. He nodded, patting my hand. "Better for having done what needed doing. Thank you for being here, Rebecca. Your dignity in the face of James's accusation spoke volumes." After ensuring Frederick was stable and had his driver ready to take him home, I made my own exit, emotionally exhausted but strangely peaceful. In the following days, the business press reported extensively on the Wilson Enterprises succession drama. James's luxury assets were indeed repossessed one by one, the Malibu house listed for sale before he'd even finished furnishing it, the yacht seized at Marina, his company car returned to the corporate fleet. Most telling was Natalie's swift departure. According to mutual acquaintances, she moved out of James's penthouse less than 3 weeks after the gala, coincidentally around the same time his credit cards began being declined at high-end retailers. 4 months after the gala, I received a call from James's new lawyer, not Randall Thornton, but a far less prestigious attorney, asking if I would be open to discussing revised divorce terms. I declined politely but firmly. The settlement was final, and reopening it would only prolong connections I was working hard to sever. Frederick had orchestrated a form of justice I never sought but couldn't deny was fitting. James had built his identity around wealth and status, using both to diminish me during our divorce. Now he was experiencing life without those shields, facing the consequences of prioritizing appearance over substance. 1 year after the gala, my life had found a new rhythm and purpose. I accepted a position as curator for an emerging arts foundation focused on providing exhibition opportunities to artists from underrepresented communities. The salary was modest compared to my former museum role, but the work brought fulfillment I hadn't experienced in years. I purchased a small but charming townhouse in a vibrant neighborhood, decorating it entirely according to my own tastes rather than conforming to the neutral palette James had always preferred. Bold colors, eclectic furniture, and art that spoke to my soul rather than investment potential transformed the space into a true reflection of myself. Through mutual friends, I occasionally heard updates about James. He had been forced to sell his weekend house in the Hamptons and downsize to a much smaller apartment. The yacht, symbol of his post-divorce freedom, was long gone. Most significantly, his position at Wilson Enterprises had been reduced to a largely ceremonial role with minimal decision-making authority. Frederick passed away peacefully 6 months after the gala, having put his affairs in order and reconciled with his brother Edward after years of distance. I attended the funeral, standing respectfully at the back of the church rather than claiming a place with family members. James acknowledged me with a curt nod but made no approach. 2 weeks after the funeral, Frederick's attorney contacted me about a specific bequest in the will. Frederick had left me his late wife's art collection, not the valuable investment pieces owned by the company or foundation, but the personal collection his wife Catherine had assembled before her death. These were works she had loved for their beauty and meaning rather than their market value, exactly the kind of art I had always most appreciated. Frederick specified that you could do whatever you wished with the collection, Jonathan explained as we reviewed the inventory. Sell it, keep it, donate it, the choice is entirely yours. I decided to keep 2 pieces that particularly moved me and donate the rest to a public museum with an educational program for underprivileged children. It felt like the right way to honor both Catherine's passion for art and Frederick's belief in moral stewardship of resources. The most unexpected moment of my healing journey came 8 months after Frederick's passing. I was in a coffee shop near my office when James walked in. He looked different, thinner, less polished, without the bespoke suits and expertly styled hair that had been his uniform during our marriage. For a moment, I considered leaving to avoid an awkward encounter, but something made me stay. James spotted me almost immediately. After ordering his coffee, he hesitated before approaching my table. "Rebecca. You look well." "Thank you, James. How are you?" He shrugged, a gesture so uncharacteristically humble it momentarily transported me back to our early days together, before success had hardened him. "Managing. Things are different now." He gestured vaguely to the chair opposite me. "May I?" I nodded, curious despite myself. James sat, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I've been meaning to contact you. To apologize, I guess." "You guess?" A flash of the old irritation crossed his features before he visibly composed himself. "No, you're right. I should apologize definitively. I treated you terribly. During our marriage, during the affair, certainly during the divorce." I studied him, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or another calculated performance. "Why tell me this now, James? What do you want?" "Nothing," he replied, then corrected himself. "No, that's not entirely true. I'd like your forgiveness, though I know I don't deserve it. And I'd like to know if you had any role in my father's decision about the will." "None whatsoever," I answered honestly. Frederick made his own judgments based on what he observed. He didn't consult me about disinheriting you, and I wouldn't have advised it if he had. James nodded slowly. "I believe you. Dad always did have his own moral compass." He paused, looking down at his coffee. "Natalie left, you know." I'd heard. Turns out she was more interested in the lifestyle than in me. Big surprise, right? His attempt at humor fell flat. I keep thinking about what Dad said at the gala, that character matters more than balance sheets. I didn't get it then. I'm trying to now. I didn't respond immediately, weighing my words carefully. James, I forgive you, not because you deserve it but because holding on to anger hurts me more than you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or returning to how things were. I understand. He stood, seemingly relieved to have completed this awkward obligation. For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness, Rebecca. Real happiness, not the performative kind we had toward the end. As he walked away, I realized the encounter had given me something I hadn't known I needed, not reconciliation with James, but reconciliation with myself. The woman who had loved him, married him, and been devastated by his betrayal was still part of me, but no longer defined me. In the months that followed, I began cautiously dating again, meeting Daniel, a literature professor, through a mutual friend's dinner party. Unlike James, Daniel had built his life around ideas and connections rather than acquisitions and status. We took things slowly, both carrying our past experiences into a potential relationship with eyes wide open. The lessons from my marriage and divorce crystallized into wisdom I hope might help others navigating similar paths. First, pay attention to how someone treats others when they're stressed or angry. It eventually becomes how they'll treat you. Second, genuine wealth isn't measured in possessions or properties but in how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Third, there's a profound difference between revenge and justice. Revenge seeks to inflict pain, justice seeks to restore balance. Frederick understood this distinction better than anyone. Finally, healing doesn't mean forgetting the past but integrating it into a wiser, more authentic version of yourself. The journey from Rebecca Wilson back to Rebecca Mitchell wasn't linear. It involved tears, therapy, supportive friends, and painful confrontations with my own choices and compromises. But standing on the other side now, I recognize that the most valuable things James took from me, my confidence, my sense of self-worth, my trust in my own judgment, were precisely the things I had to reclaim on my own. If you're navigating your own journey through betrayal or loss, remember that healing doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. Trust in your resilience. Surround yourself with people who value your authentic self. And remember that sometimes, the most profound growth happens when you're forced to rebuild what you thought you couldn't live without. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed justice arrive through unexpected channels? How did you rebuild after a betrayal? Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that even after the most painful endings, new beginnings are possible. I'm grateful for this community and the healing that comes from sharing our journeys together.